Are we reaching new heights or depths? And now the news, pumped full of additional nutrients and analyzed. Anytime you tell how you're feeling, you're partially lying. Man is the only creature who believes that he can stand on his own shoulders, which is what makes it damn near possible. What the tongue can say, the ears in the same head can hear, and then immediately make that tongue fall up and say, we knew that. And it was a follow-up to a story from last news night that pointed out that if cows could fly, they would fly in formation. And this follow-up points out, well, combined with another one, that if you tell how you feel, you'll always be comparable, tied to if you settle for being comparable. Boy, that's a lot of stories put together. Here we go. No, gesture 17. It was a combination of two stories. I had the wrong two stories. It was a combination of two stories. One is if you settle for being comparable, you'll never be incomparable. Combined with if you tell how you feel, you'll always be comparable. That was the connection. And also another story from last time that described ordinary collective education as hearing aids for the blind. And it was an expansion of that story that points out that the collective's mind, tied to the idea of education, is always inclined, bent toward the kind of action wherein it treats that which is not ill and attempts to repair that is not yet broken. All of this, believe it or not, pumped full of additional oxygen and nutrients, tied to what we were talking last time about that kind of leap between feelings and thinking, that which makes man man. The one about being comparable was not, I'm suggesting through my analyzation of the news, was not simply a cheap shot at playing on words. You remember the news story that said, if you will settle for being comparable, then you can never be incomparable. This has nothing to do with being famous. This has nothing to do with being recognized, because if you know how to do it, nobody can recognize it anyway. But if you settle for being comparable in the wide sense of the expression, and that would be that you do anything that would identify yourself as being part of the collective. Those of you who can hear fast, anything that would identify you as attempting to stand on the top of Mount Everest, which in the collective sense is somewhere in the neighborhood of about a millimeter above sea level. That's the collective Mount Everest. And put down your flag and holler, yes, I'm one of you. I have conquered it. I am now as ordinary as anybody. Yes, I'm sane. Yes, I'm reasonable. Yes, I'm going to get a better haircut, better clothes. I'm working on it, reading books at night, trying my best. If you will settle for that, which of course one way to put it is, if you want that, if you're working for that, if that is the height of your aspirations, then would it be safe to assume that that will be as high as you ever get? And it's not even on the basis of that kind of sequential vertical movement. That is, well, if you don't aim high, you'll never get high. I'm not sure I'm quoting the way that they actually say that amongst ordinary people. It's something like, if you don't aim for the stars, you'll end up in the gutter. You got it, don't you? That the collective wisdom is, if you do not aspire to higher things, then you'll never reach higher things. A man must have aims and goals. But it is not sequentially a vertical movement. That is, anything the collective says is worthwhile, of course to them is worthwhile. But anything that the collective wisdom of man says is worthwhile, if you adopt that, then you're stuck with it. And it's not vertical. It just appears to be. It doesn't mean that you're worse off, but what it means is that you can't move. So you're not worse off, you're just stalemated. You're stagnant, you're not going anywhere. So if you will settle for being comparable, and everyone in life, anyone who is sane and of a collective mind will settle for being comparable, even if they didn't like the way that I put that initially. Once you describe, well, being comparable is something that that your fellow man, that the rest of the collective will recognize as being an achievement. And they'll go, oh, well, yes, I do want to be comparable. Once they understood the intent of the news item, they would say, well, I want to be unusually comparable, but certainly I want to be comparable. That is, I want my achievements to be recognizable, which is being comparable. It's wonderful to get to the coda or a punchline and be met with that kind of enthusiastic, meaningful silence. If your desire is to be recognized in any way by your fellow man, your fellow ordinary man, that is being comparable. No matter what they say, well, I want to be the head of the philosophy department, the math department. I want a Pulitzer Prize. I want my own chicken farm. Now that you bring up the subject. Which is fine as long amongst real thinkers, all that's fine as long as you didn't take it seriously. I mean, it's just a hobby. You got to do something to kill 60 or 70 years, I know. But ordinary people, the kind of awards and achievements that they hand out is being comparable, as opposed to doing something extraordinary internally that is not comparable. If you can think for yourself, if you can think in some way, whatever the hell that might mean, as impossible as it is verbally, if you might be able to think more independently, if you might be able to think in a nonpartisan way, if you might be able to think in a way that literally defies gravity and all sense and sensation of centrifugal force, which is partisan thinking, which is the way the mind operates. If in any way you could run electrical charges to your brain that were not AC, there's no name for it, but if all of that would be thinking for yourself. If you could do that, there's no ordinary person on this planet that's going to recognize it. If you're waiting, that's part of the dreams that this kind of thing has turned in throughout the ages into ideas of religious mysticism and etc. And that people end up doing rituals and trying to stand on one foot for 20 years or trying to, let their fingernails grow for 14 feet. And you might say, well, what the hell does that have to do with anything extraordinary? Well, it has something to do with something extraordinary that can be seen. Now, you could be some kind of low-level smartass and say, well, wait a minute. Being able to stand on one foot until you petrify or letting your fingernails grow out to where they're 14 feet long, that has something to do with one's inner development. Yeah, but at least other people can recognize it and go, God, is that extraordinary? It may be dumb and foolish, but is that not extraordinary? That is where that sort of thing came about. That's gesture 22. But if you actually did something extraordinary internally, the point being, no one's going to recognize it. There was a news item tonight, whether you call it the humor, there was a kind of a fake quiz that said, what is the loneliest job in the world? And then you're supposed to, your heart was supposed to be wrenched like, wait a minute, that was some kind of devilish hint that, doing all this, I'll never be recognized like my cousin Fred who let his fingernails grow out. It was only 9 feet, but hell, even he got some kind of award. I mean, it was just a little town out in Arkansas where he lived, but at least they got together, and they made him temporarily a city monument. But if you can do anything extraordinary with the nervous system, and the only place you can do anything extraordinary, as we have well established by now, is at the end of it, the high end, at the brain. And anything you can do there, if you can do it extraordinary, if it's not nonpartisan, if it is what we're insinuating through the terms such as independent and individual thinking, there's no way that another human is going to recognize it. That's not the point, but it simply cannot happen. Contraire, semi-contraire. It's really kind of about 78 degrees from contraire. If you tried, which a person that was not ordinary of mind would not do this, but if you could think in an extraordinary way, that's 17 again. If you could think in some way that was extraordinary and you decide, wait a minute, I'm going to make other people see it. They can't see it to begin with, but if it was possible, if you tried to make them see it, they'd see it even less. You follow? It's that kind of 5-dimensional mathematics. You understand? They can't see it anyway, but if you tried to make them see it like, come here, I got to tell you the truth. I know I don't look like much, but internally, it's unbelievable the kinds of things I can think about. All right, ordinary people, that's 14. Ordinary people cannot hear that. This is a combination, 14 and 17. Ordinary people can't hear it, but if you try to make them hear it, they can hear it even less. All of that, back to where the subject was, all of that has to do with the fact that, although I know it was not the ordinary use of the terminology and the words, all of that would be being comparable. That is, you're trying to be incomparable at the ordinary level, but if you're trying to be incomparable at the ordinary level, if you're trying to be famous in the city, back to some of our earlier terminology and metaphors, if you're trying to be famous at city level with everyone else, you can't be. Whatever it is that would make you famous at that level is not what this sort of thing's about. You follow? In other words, to be incomparable in the city is to be the epitome, or exemplary, shall we say, of comparableness. There's no one, from a more independent view, there's no one, it's not any worse. That used to be 11. I'm not sure how. My new book, if you'll order it, it's got them, of course, correctly numbered, but I've already forgotten. You're no worse off, but at city level, what we're talking about, if indeed you were recognized as a leading authority, you're no worse off, but just for the sake of trying to get you to see it, that is exemplary of being common. To be recognized by other common people as being uncommon. I thought maybe we could slip up on it. With ordinary people, that'd sound like what? Well, that'd be a beautiful example to ordinary people is, wait a minute, that's got to be some kind of little machine that this man is powering through the strange fuel of sour grapes. How's that? No, it's just a fact. All right. If you're going to be recognized, we can make it into a fable. That pig's not here that complained, is he? That was something last time. If you recall, there were several mentions of fables, and some guy said that he didn't want to be part of a fable, and then a pig pointed out that, they didn't either, but they couldn't do anything about it. Which men can't actually do anything about it except for this. 11, they can complain, and the pig couldn't even complain. That's why he complained about it. So let's use a fable. If you seek and even gain the recognition of, what would you like, fleas? What are you going to be? Now, you could be the sort that would misuse a fable. I'm not going to name names, but you could be there, and you could say, well, if we're going to use that kind of metaphor and say, what kind of person would it be that would accept, solicit, bathe in the recognition of fleas? Then if you were that kind of torturer of fable, you could say, all right, an elephant. Ha ha, got you. Wrong. Because then it's not comparable. The elephant could not recognize the recognition of fleas. I mean, if you had fleas, an elephant just came walking down the elephant trail, and suddenly, for whatever reason, to go along with this fable, that suddenly fleas went, my God, look, have you ever seen? It must be God. And just think, all these little fleas, and it's not just the size, but surely they're on different levels. But the size will give you some idea. If the fleas, in their flea culture, at flea level consciousness, they all get together and they're going, yay, yay, right on there, and they're doing hosannas to an elephant. It's beyond meaningless. It doesn't exist. It's not comparable. It's not simply, don't take the easy way, which you could, and that'd be the end of a fable for regular dunderheaded children, and I'm not going to name names. But that's not the end of it. If it's an ordinary person, they can say, well, I see the point. You're saying that an elephant is so large, what the hell does he care whether fleas approve of him or disapprove of him? May I say, tut, tut. This is a head gesture. Now, this is in chapter 7, not hand. Tut, tut. It's not just the size. They are not comparable. If you've got to get your toe wet, right quick, do it, but then move on and say, all right, it is the size. So what does it mean to an elephant if all the fleas, the leading fleas, the fleas who themselves are recipients of Nobel Prizes, Pulitzer Prizes, and other small poetry awards that actually carry no great deal of money with them. But if some of the leading fleas of the flea culture all get together and pay homage to an elephant, and the elephant look down, what does it mean to him, right? All right, now move on. It's not just that. It is that they are incomparable. The two. Now back to where we were. If you will accept, if you will solicit, if you hunger for, if it has any meaning, the recognition of the collective, which is not a qualitative judgment. It's not us saying, well, people don't know anything. What the hell do you matter whether they care? That's not it. It's that the only thing possible for the collective to recognize is collective behavior, collective achievement. If collective achievement's what you want, what in the goddamn hell are you doing sitting around listening to stuff like this? Because it's not going to help. I'm going to do another book on Masters of Understatement, which will consist, I guess, primarily, if not entirely, of that last comment. But stuff like this is not going to help. Once you understand and have a good grasp of that kind of understatement, I'm not sure man needs another one. In other words, trying to do something individually, once you understand what individual is, inside the privacy of your own nervous system, not the privacy of your imaginary soul, not the privacy of your imaginary religious heart and spirit, but inside of your mind, where all of this originates. Trying to do something there, and thinking that can be recognized that has anything to do with what the collective thinks, not right or wrong. It's a different matter of degrees between elephants and fleas. And at least you really stop there. It's really between elephants and fleas when we use that kind of allegory just a bit further, but it's the difference between elephants and fleas. And like the elephants, let's just say, for instance, are living in the Eastern time zone in 5 dimensions, and the fleas are living in Pacific Standard Time in 3 dimensions. All of that being equal, and if they could still be, that they could see each other in some way. That is the point of saying that if you're trying to achieve anything on the basis of what the collective already knows, then you're always comparable. And another piece of a story of a news item that they didn't bring in, the one I started to bring out, that I obviously was reading in my own brain instead of on the papers they handed me, was the one about if cows could fly, they would fly in formation. And the follow-up tonight, an expansion of it, was that what that really points to is the fact that things relative to themselves, which is simply reality on the move, but things relative to themselves, if they do change, one thing always stays the same. Inside the context, those of you who want a cosmological picture, I'll steal it from ordinary, the expansion continually of the universe, that everything stays in relationship to itself in some way. And back to if cows could fly, that they would fly in formation, that no matter how things change in relationship to themselves, men always do this. They continue to think as men are supposed to think. So no matter how you measure what's going on collectively, if that's what you find to be of interest, of any achievement, then that's the level at which you're stuck. Or that's the level at which you live. Nothing wrong with it. But then you're comparable forever. And therefore, if you're comparable forever, you can never be incomparable. And the part that was tied to tonight, the incomparableness, it was also tied in the story now that if you will tell how you feel, you will always be comparable. Because if you tell how you feel, you're doing what? I give. If you tell how you feel, then you're taking the father, the mother, I hope they'll forgive me in Iraq, of all comparableness, which is the great leap from the limbic, emotional end of man's nervous system up to that part. The great leap from a silent feeling world to a noisy verbal one. From the limbic system to the cortical system, to use that. But there is the most miraculous thing that you can see inside of 3 dimensions. Absolutely astounding. Incomparable. Did I put my foot in it? not on your life. Absolutely incomparable except for this. Everything's staying relative to itself. That is the mother of all comparableness. Because that is the foundation. That's the bottom floor. That is the very foundation upon which a man can think. You can't get any lower than that. If that is not the mother, if that is not the basis of all comparableness, ordinariness, right there, then you can't even think. So once you can think, you're extraordinary compared to any other creature in 3 dimensions. So if you're this extraordinary creature that can think, that proves one thing without any doubt. What is that? That you're alive. Are they giving out Nobels this year for being alive? Is there any sort of recognition for being alive? You guess. You've been around the block a few times. You guess. So once you're comparable, once you're alive, you're comparable. Anything that passes in there, which is all of man's institutions, all of man's culture, it is everything that cows now do. In the continual shoring up of their own boxcars, getting themselves ready for the next move. All of that is within that short realm of 8,000 years, a silly millimeter, 14 hours, 6 feet, between 6 and 7 feet. All of that. And for those of you that enjoyed it, the leap between the Mediterranean and Miami Beach, from Eden to the Eden Rock. That is the height and the base of all ordinariness, all comparableness. And so anything that you do within that, anything that is done to you within that, anything that you take out of that area, anything in that area that takes out of you is comparable. If you can think, it's all the same. Not good, it's not bad, there's nothing to be mad about. It's simply one aspect of life. It is normally the aspect that takes up most people's 60 or 70 years. Fooling with it, wrestling with it, bitching about it, and obviously, as you should know by now, by the time you get past 19 or 20, or maybe you're a real holdout, by the time you're 25, you're feeling as, screw it. That is, unless you're very close to being rich and famous, and may still have a shot at an Academy Award. And assuming that you're past that point, your general feeling is, screw it. How long it is before I'm going to die? Just a hobby. Back to where I was going to type, or try to, what the news already tied up tonight. The one way that you're sure to stay comparable, to stay ordinary, is to tell how you feel. Because for the brain, for the cortical system, the talking intellect of man, to tell how it feels is translating that which comes from the silent limbic world, the flea world, the elephant world. And no matter what you do, for a man to tell how he feels under the best of circumstance, which means nothing, but under the best of circumstance, I slyly put in 17 right here at the end. Well, you get that in the Master Advanced course if you buy the book. It's how to do it when playing like you're not and just go. Under the absolute best of circumstance, for a man to tell how he feels, no matter how sincere, no matter how he tries, under all and the best of circumstance, you will partially lie. You can't help it. There is no way out. There is no such thing, how about another? There is no such thing as a perfect translation. No way. You can take the world's greatest and they'll admit it. The more they know, the more that they would freely admit. You take the world's greatest linguist, the greatest translator of Russia, of any language, of Spanish, and they'll translate, they're the world's leading expert. They have an Academy Award in Spanish translations. And they're translating something from Italian to Spanish, and they will tell you, listen, we're getting to some of the areas when it gets past just yes and no and me and you, and even that sometimes gets tricky. There is no way to perfectly translate from Spanish into Italian, from any language. All of you know that. It just cannot be done. They would attribute it to other causes like, well, There are variations in one's cultures, and etc. There's simply no such thing as a perfect translation. And of course, when you get good, you realize all that is always crude metaphors, because once man learned to talk, remember, everything became potentially a metaphor having to do with his life. So you don't have to look at the translation from Italian to Spanish or from Serb to Croat. Don't write me and tell me there's no such language, or I'll send you back in the mail 2 unsolicited gestures. And you'll open the envelope and they'll leap out. There, remember, there is the original example of the faults, the shortcomings of translations. You're translating silence into speech. You're translating the great silent potential into a verbal actualization. There's no way that there's nothing comparable. Between feeling, nothing perfectly comparable between feeling and talk, which is, if you recall from last time, part of the purpose of talk, part of the purpose of being civilized, to at least, under certain conditions, to substitute action, which would be down there, for certain actions, for words. I hate your guts, which is an improvement from the collective view to killing the person. That I hate you in words. I hate you so bad I hope you die, but I'm not going to do anything about it to make you die. It is a faulty translation because you can't hate somebody bad enough to kill them on the spot. So it's a faulty translation, you understand. That I want you dead, I hate you. Well, that may hurt the person. If it's a friend or your mother, she may go, well, Jesus, that almost killed me. But not really. No. Because the perfect translation would be, I hate you so bad I wish you were dead. So, all words are faulty. All words are slightly off the mark. All words are somewhere this side of a perfect translation from the nonverbal world of feeling. But at the collective level, remember, it's an improvement. That's part of the reason man talks. It is a boon to the collective. To the herd is better off. The individual is left in the midst of a less than perfect translation, left in a world in which he thinks, I am seeking something, and I keep looking for other cows, or 2 other cows, 2 other sheep, let me hear it. And even if they like you as best they can, what can they do? The best they can give you is meh, or moo. And a few people find out, well, bless their hearts, they're doing the best they can, and hell, that's about all I can do is get up to a good moo or a bah. But I got to tell myself the truth. That ain't it. So you end up with your own kind of bovine Academy Award of a little cow head up on your mantle. Not just the physical recognition by my peers, which is what that would represent, but what it is internally. If you would be satisfied with, all right, I now approve of me, but I approve of me on the level of where I started out. Which is always, if you need one more perhaps clear way to look at it, is that old story, which is faulty in itself the way they translate it, but it's that old story that men in life, ordinary men, suddenly gain the Holy Grail, the magic touch, the wild duck, a paid-for Ferrari, and they go, well, geez. Damn. In other words, they're not satisfied. That's it. If you seek to be satisfied through comparable means, through recognition of fellow cows, fleas, sheep, then you'll always be there. It's just a different ball game. And if you talk about how you feel, there's no chance of moving from that. Who it is, Dorothy Parker? Not a Dorothy Parker. Who is it, the pavilion where they have the Academy Awards? I almost pulled it off. I thought I knew. I was only a split second ahead of my thinking. Who is it? Chandler. Good thing we're not on tape, or boy, I look like an ass.